to our first meeting of the year. Last week we should have had the meeting, but we couldn't because we're preparing for SONA debates. You are all welcome, honorable members, into the new year. Welcome the support team from Parliament, all the sections of Parliament, the Secretariat, the research team, PBO, legal divisions, communications, and others. Let me welcome officials from National Treasury and the Deputy Minister or Minister if they are in the platform, and the DG. Welcome SARS Commissioner and his team. Welcome the AG and the entire team from the AG led by Ms. Matanzima. Welcome if ever the FFC officials, or I'm not sure whether FFC will have to attend, or the independent commission when we deal with that item 8 are in the platform. Also welcome the media and all others who are in the platform. You are all welcome. Let's start with our meeting. The first item, I've done the welcome, the opening. The meeting is officially open. Are there apologies?
No apologies from the Standing Committee on Finance, Chair, but there was an apology from the Minister and the DG that I sent through to you.
Okay. But I see the Deputy Minister is here in the platform. Noxie, are you there in the platform? As when I have a challenge with the network this side, you can continue with the sharing. Alan Tebo with Ms. Abraham in the platform.
She is, Chair. She's probably also got connectivity or connection issue. I'll just follow up with her again.
Okay. Let's proceed. Who else is in the platform? Kosana, can you hear me? Okay.
I'm in the platform, Senate. I am in the platform.
Yeah, Chair,
Nox, in case I have a challenge with the network, you will share. If you also have a challenge, Kosana will take over. Because you can see this problem of load shedding is all over. Yeah, so I don't want to have a vacuum in between. Let's proceed. Let's move faster because we have got a very long agenda. We have tried to squeeze everything to today. Let's move to the next item, briefing by the Auditor-General on audit outcomes of National Treasury and its entities. It's something undesirable that now when we're supposed to be dealing with the budget, we are also at the same time dealing with have to process the report from the AG and the B-RRR, something that we should have done last year, and it is recurring. I hope next time this thing is going to be avoided. I've seen the policy, dispute resolution mechanism policy that has been submitted to us by the AG. The sooner AG with the auditees you deal with the issue of dispute, the better. Many committees of Parliament have dealt with the B-RRR, but it is us, I don't know which other committee, I can't speak for other committees, who have to deal with B-RRR late in the year or in the following year when we're supposed to be processing SONA, and then also at the same time the budget. Please do things differently starting from this year. We're appealing, as you can see, that it is causing a serious inconvenience to the program of Parliament. With that as it may, let me hand over to Ms. Matanzima to brief the committee on the audit outcomes of National Treasury and its entities. Over to you, Ms. Matanzima.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable members and Honorable Deputy Minister, as well as the Finance Portfolio Executives and Management. My name is Nombakamo Matanzima. I am the Business Unit Leader that oversees the finance portfolio audits. Thank you once again, Honorable Chair and the members, for affording us this opportunity to brief the committee on the audit outcomes of the finance portfolio for the 2021-2022 financial year end. But if you allow me, Chair, before I can start with my introductory remarks, I would just like to introduce my fellow colleagues that are here today. One is Kumari Naika, who is the Deputy Business Unit Lead on Land Bank and Insurance Entities. And with her as well, we've got Nicholas Mukwena, who is the Deputy Business Leader that oversees the Land Bank and its entities. We've got National Treasury Lead Senior Manager and its entities, who will be the one who's going to take us through to the detailed presentation. I've also have many other senior managers that are on the call, which are also present in this section. But before we can start with the detailed, I do acknowledge that there was an accountability oversight process was delayed. And the main reason, Honorable Chair and the members—
Recording in progress.
Was to the finalization of the National Treasury's audit, which was not finalized on time. And the main reason for that was pertaining to the dispute that was lodged by the National Treasury. And this dispute was dealt by the Auditor-General in accordance with the dispute resolution mechanism that was in place then. And the main reason and the main dispute is relating to the treatment of the annual technical support and maintenance payments that are being paid on an annual basis by the National Treasury relating to the IFMS project. The disagreement is relating to the treatment of those, whether they are fruitless and wasteful expenditure as defined. We do acknowledge that this agreement is not new. It has been there. However, the National Treasury normally disclosed this as a fruitless and wasteful expenditure. What is new in the 2021-2022, the National Treasury decided to remove the previously disclosed fruitless and wasteful expenditure pertaining to these payments. And this now has resulted, in our view, is incorrect, and therefore resulted in National Treasury being qualified on the completeness of fruitless and wasteful expenditure disclosed on the financial statements. These delays going forward, Honorable Chair and members, we have now revised the dispute resolution process to ensure that these further delays are not experienced by the committees in Parliament. This policy now, the new policy, as you mentioned, we have shared it with the committee, and it's going to allow us to expedite the process going forward and ensure we minimize the delays in the process. The policy has been taken to the SCOWEC in consultation with SCOWEC as the requirement by the Public Audit Act. And we do acknowledge that going forward, with these kind of delays will be prevented accordingly. Despite the dispute with the National Treasury, when we look at the finance portfolio, Honorable Chair and members, we have found that the overall portfolio audit outcomes have regressed. However, there were entities that improved with the examples of the ERBA and also the Land Bank receiving a clean audit opinion. But I just want to highlight to the committee that the Land Bank performance information was not subjected to audit, as it was granted an exemption by the executive authority not to do so. This is mainly as a result of the current default position that the bank is currently resolving with the lenders. And it is something that I just want to bring to the attention. And I know it's a key priority by the committee to ensure that process, that liability solution is being finalized. We've also noted as well a progress in the filling of the key strategic positions within the finance portfolio subsequent to the financial year end, which is very commendable. We've seen the filling of the position of Accountant General, the Chief Procurement Officer for National Treasury, the CEO of ERBA, and also JIPA, and some of the board appointments within the finance entities. But there's still some key areas as well of filling of the positions within the finance portfolio, especially at the CFO level, and some of the key entities that still needs to be filled, of which the committee and I commend the committee as well because of that quarterly audit action plans that are being reviewed by the committee. It does have some fruitful results. We have also, as part of Auditor-General, we have adopted our culture shift strategy 2020-30. And our strategy actually is aiming at shifting a critical mass of our auditees towards cultures that are characterized by performance, by accountability, by transparency, and also integrity. So in the current financial year that we've audited, our focus has shifted as well to ensure that the entities in the finance portfolio are delivering according to their core mandate, and then whether they are achieving or are not achieving their key targets as per their core mandate. We have, for example, DBSA, who is tasked with implementing some of the key countries' initiatives, including infrastructure fund. And we have noted some of the non-achievement in that space of infrastructure fund. And we have to bring to the committee's attention as well. But we also noted some of the auditees that have really achieved more than 80% and 70% of the key targets that are relating to their core mandate. And our main aim for this focus as well is to ensure that an unqualified audit opinion or a clean audit opinion does translate to the service delivery and the lived experiences of the South African citizens. So this is what we want to see as the culture that has been shifted into the public sector. Another key focus area for us as well in the previous year was relating to the coordinating ministry role that is performed by the national treasuries. That is the role they played as the treasuries in providing support and also exercising oversight over the local government sphere. We assess the effectiveness and the impact of these treasuries in delivering on this mandate, while at the same time appreciating the limitations, the inherent limitations in their role. So we ensure that whatever initiatives or interventions that have been deployed to ensure there is a proper or adequate improved status as the state of local government has improved, and whether those initiatives or interventions are working. Before I will now hand over, so those are key messages that we're coming out, and we'll go now deeper to the detailed presentations. And if you allow me, Honorable Chair, with your permission, I will now hand over to Laz, who will take us through the detailed presentation of the full finance portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Nombakamo. Greetings, Chairperson, the members of SCOF, the Deputy Minister, the DG from Treasury and Management, the Commissioner, and all those who are in attendance at today's meeting. My name is Lwazi Kuse, and I am the Senior Manager responsible for the National Treasury audit, together with some of the entities within the portfolio. As indicated, Chair, I will be taking the committee through the presentation, the outcomes. I think, Chairperson, as I do so, I will just project the presentation and take down my video such that the connectivity throughout the presentation is at the right quality level. If one of the colleagues can confirm that the presentation is showing, and then I can proceed.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Just need to take down the video. Thank you. Chairperson has indicated, today we are presenting the PFMA audit outcomes for the 21-22 financial period in relation to the finance portfolio, which is National Treasury together with the entities within the portfolio. As we do so, Chairperson, I think we are mindful of the fact that this is not a once-off exercise. I think, Chairperson, it's important to appreciate the role that the committee has played in the audit process and the accountability ecosystem. In years previous, Chair, we have presented the audit outcomes, but what has been commendable from the committee is to see that our messages have resulted in action, particularly on the part of the committee, the minister, and various other stakeholders. We saw last year the committee resolving to, on a quarterly basis, follow up action plans to ensure that the audit findings that we've been reporting are addressed. And we have seen, Chairperson, in as much as the overall audit outcomes might not yet reflect that picture, but we have seen a change and a shift insofar as our auditees paying particular attention to these action plans and ensuring that these control deficiencies are addressed. So as we take you through the presentation, we will be highlighting those areas. And I think it's important, Jay, to highlight those so that we continue with that momentum, but also we highlight the areas where there's no or there's limited movement. As indicated by my colleagues, with effect from the 1st of April 2022, the AGSA approved and adopted a new strategy, which is called Culture Shift 2030. At the center of that strategy, Chairperson, is to ensure that when we perform our audits, we not only reflect on the financial statements, performance information, as well as compliance, but also we link those messages to the broader mandates and service delivery imperatives of our auditees. And so you will see in this presentation, Chairperson, being the first year of implementation of this new strategy, you will see that we do reflect on, is it clean, is it not clean? But there is a bigger question, and I think a question that the public has been asking, to say, given that a particular outcome is clean or is unqualified with no findings, what does it then mean in relation to service delivery? And with this culture shift strategy, we are then attempting to respond to some of those gaps and ultimately ensure that we continue to strengthen our country's democracy. In as much as we have changed our strategy to culture shift, our mission and our vision remains the same. And that mission, Chairperson, is to ensure that we strengthen our country's democracy by enabling oversight, accountability, and governance in the public sector. And this, Chairperson, we achieve through auditing and thereby building public confidence. And as we audit, Chairperson, as indicated, we have three main areas of reporting. The first area is we express an audit opinion on the financial statements. The second area is we also give an opinion on performance information. And we do so, Chairperson, in our audit report by indicating if there were material findings identified during our testing of the performance indicators, as well as the achieved performance results at the end of the year. The last area is compliance with legislation, where equally here we report on material findings that we would have identified in the course of our audit. I think it's important, Chairperson, to say that our mandate, our mission, therefore, remains the same. It's a question of changing the approach such that we have greater impact and we are responsive to the needs of the public insofar as ensuring that we build public confidence, as it were. The pictorial on the next slide, Chairperson, just depicts in a summarized format the key stages within the audit process that link to our new strategy. So what happens in a normal course, Chairperson, is that our audit teams are physically on the ground on various auditees. And as they perform their audit work, they would be making recommendations, engaging with management officials, and sharing what is best practice in various areas. What we call this process, Chairperson, I think there's greater emphasis now to say our recommendations should also assist us to generate key insights around the service delivery imperatives. And once we're able to do so, we start then sharing those with our management teams, all up to the level of the executive authority. And as part of that process of sharing recommendations and insights, we would want then to ensure that we influence our various stakeholders in the value chain. And this influence then, Chairperson, simply put, we are saying, how do we ensure that there's an improvement in the audit outcomes? But equally, how do we then ensure that there is an improvement in service delivery and the performance of the mandates of the respective entities? The last and perhaps critical element, Chairperson, is also enforcement. You'll recall, Chairperson, that in April of 2019, the AGSA through the PAA was granted additional powers, and these powers relate to material irregularities. And what we've seen, Chairperson, and what necessitated this introduction of material irregularities is that the AGSA would be annually reporting on various matters, making recommendations. And in some instances, we would then see that there is little or no movement insofar as implementing some of the corrective measures, in particular in the area of compliance with legislation. So the introduction of MIs, in summary, Chairperson, enables the AGSA to play a greater role working with accounting officers to ensure that there is implementation and there is ultimately recovery of any losses that would be suffered by the organs of state. These additional powers, Chairperson, do not replace the existing powers of accounting officers, and therefore it is important that we work together with accounting officers. In summary, Chairperson, if I was to put it in a simple way, what is a material irregularity? A material irregularity is an instance where we have non-compliance, but furthermore, we then have losses that will be suffered by that organ of state. So if we link that to the definition of irregular expenditure, there will be instances where certainly irregular expenditure would mean that there is a non-compliance that has taken place. But where we intervene is also where there is that non-compliance together with any financial losses that would have been suffered by a particular organ of state. And in terms of the actions that we can then take, Chair, as indicated, we can then make various recommendations. Firstly, we can make recommendations for the accounting officer to investigate the matter further, or we can refer the matter to other regulatory bodies for them to investigate. Once that has been concluded, Chairperson, we then recommend the necessary corrective action. And we can also take binding remedial action for any failures that emanate from the recommendations we make. But I think what is of significance, Chair, is that where there is then non-implementation of our recommendations, you will then see us exercising the last and perhaps most critical power we have, which is to issue a certificate of debt to ensure that those losses suffered are then recouped from those that are responsible. So I think all in all, Chairperson, the shift in the approach, the strategy requires all of us to work together. And therefore, it's important that our relationship with the Oversight Committee, SCOF in this particular instance, but together with any other parliamentary committee that exercises oversight over these entities, that we work together, we share these insights, and we assist the committees in exercising oversight by indicating areas where we believe that we need to strengthen and we need to improve. The last area, Chairperson, as mentioned by my colleague, is the fact that we are also looking at the role of coordinating departments or ministries. Simply put, Chairperson, these would be the departments that have oversight and support functions in relation to their mandate. National Treasury is one of those, COGTA, and various others. And what we are saying here, Chairperson, is that if we want to improve service delivery and if we are interested in improving audit outcomes, we need to engage other relevant stakeholders, but also to ensure that the outcomes and the processes are sustainable going forward. Collaborating with National Treasury will ensure that we go further, because it would simply mean that the AGSA is not driving this culture shift agenda on its own. So we are working with these departments to ultimately ensure that we improve and shift the culture. If we can then reflect on the portfolio of finance, we have the department and we have grouped a total of 16 entities. In total, we are reporting on 16 entities, and we have grouped or categorized them in the quadrant or in the segment of regulatory agencies, government components, development banks, insurance and investments, and the revenue entity, which is SARS. This presentation, Chairperson, does not include section 43 entities, and this would mean that SASRIA and other entities would not be part of our presentation. The CBDA, for purposes of our presentation and our methodology, we classify it as a small auditee. So it simply means that the focus areas, there are elements where we will not have detailed messages for the CBDA given the size of the entity. If we reflect on the overall audit outcomes, we will note, Chairperson, that in the current year, there are 6 clean audit outcomes, and those relate to the FSCA, ERBA, Land Bank and its insurance companies, and lastly, the DBSA. From that perspective, Chairperson, we wish to commend these entities for ensuring that they adhere to the legislative requirements and that they implement sound controls that are able to produce credible financial results, ensure compliance with legislation, and ultimately produce also performance information that is credible. We wish to urge these entities to continue and also to ensure that they drive the implementation of their mandates and their service delivery objectives. We also have 9 auditees, Chairperson, that have received unqualified audit opinions with findings. So when we say with findings, Chairperson, it simply means that in the 3 areas that we focus on, yes, on the financial statements, you have been unqualified, but in the area of compliance, you might find that then there are then findings, or in the area of performance information, there are then material findings. We will unpack those as we go through the presentation. And then lastly, as indicated by my colleague, National Treasury has a qualified audit opinion. And the qualified audit opinion relates to the IFMS project. I think, for purposes of background, we do engage and have engaged over a period of 5 years on IFMS as a project. But in summary, I think it's important to just give some background in terms of what IFMS is and how did we arrive at a qualified audit opinion. The establishment of the IFMS project is an outcome of a cabinet resolution that was taken in 2013. And its objective was to replace the legacy systems that are currently being used by government. Simply meaning, Chairperson, this is one of the strategically important projects of the country, as government currently, especially from a departmental point of view, operates on your legacy or historic systems such as BES, LOGIS. Those systems have their inherent limitations, and with the technology advancements, it simply means that we are not reaping the benefits and we are not efficient in how we would go about financial reporting, payroll, and various other functions. In 2016, National Treasury, having undergone a procurement process, entered into a contract, and the contract resulted in the department acquiring licenses upfront to the value of about 390 million. So these licenses were bought upfront, Chairperson, and give the department perpetual usage rights. As part of the contract that was entered into, Chairperson, there is an element of annual technical support and maintenance. This annual technical support and maintenance is payable or is renewable annually. In other words, the department can each year make a decision as to whether it wishes to extend or not that particular aspect. On 5-year intervals, there are then price negotiations where the support and maintenance is then agreed to pricing-wise. To the extent that the support and maintenance is not renewed, there are then penalties as well that are associated with this contract, where it will mean that if the department decided not to renew for a period of 2 years, and in the 3rd year renewed the contract, it would attract penalties of 150%, and this 150% would be backdated from the date when there was non-usage of this. When the project started, Chairperson, there was what we call a project charter or project plans, and those initial project plans anticipated that IFMS would be rolled out nationally by 31 March 2021. There were various stages in the plan, including piloting and so on, leading up to the ultimate implementation of the solution in March 2021. Also, Chairperson, one must appreciate the fact that internally, National Treasury, at the time of these plans and the procurement activity, had to undergo a process of sourcing additional resources as there was no internal capacity within the department to ensure a full rollout of the system. And one of the critical steps then was to, through SETA, ensure that those additional resources are procured and ultimately in the form of consultants, then they would form part of the implementation process. The project itself, Chairperson, also requires a number of stakeholders. It's not only National Treasury, so you have the other role players in the form of SETA, DPSA that would equally play a role. And then lastly, Chairperson, when it comes to the actual findings that we have raised, from an audit point of view, since 2016, we have raised various audit findings to the effect that the annual expenditure for technical support and maintenance is fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And that value is annually a value of around 68 million. So what we were saying, Chairperson, to the extent that IFMS, as we speak, up until the last audit cycle, which is March 2022, IFMS remains a project not yet implemented. And the project milestones have now been revised from March 2021 to March 2024. We went further in the current year and we looked at the extent of utilization of the licenses or of the IFMS project, as it were. And in going in a detailed approach, Chairperson, we were able to confirm that of the licenses that were procured upfront, 99.9% of those licenses are not in use. So with that, Chairperson, we were then able to conclude from our side that indeed the expenditure meets the definition of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. There have been various disagreements along the way. And as indicated in the current year, the department, due to the long-standing disagreement, decided to remove the disclosure of fruitless and wasteful expenditure for IFMS. The removal simply means that the financial statements are not fairly stated, as there are material amounts that have been omitted in those particular financial statements. Equally, the associated disclosures and narratives related to prior year restatements, we have then indicated that those are equally misstated. The opinion that we issue as a qualified then Chairperson simply ring fences the qualification. So if you look at the entire body of the financial statement, so we can say, we are simply saying that those other areas are fairly stated with the exception of this one area. Another important step, Chairperson, is to say that given that we have identified these losses, given that we have identified a non-compliance, we are exercising our additional powers from the PAA insofar as material irregularities are concerned. So in the current year, we did notify the accounting officer that there is a material irregularity that has taken place. The accounting officer responded to our notification and disagreed that there was a material irregularity, indicating that there will be long-term benefit for the department insofar as IFMS is concerned. At the time, then, Chairperson, we had to decide on the way forward or the next steps insofar as this material irregularity. We took into account that the SIU already had an existing proclamation to investigate the IFMS project. And so, Chairperson, noting the disagreement with the accounting officer, noting the fact that there is already an investigation underway, we have then referred the IFMS financial losses, or MI, for further investigation to the SIU. Chairperson, Going back to the movements of the overall audit outcomes, my colleague has highlighted, and we wish to commend IRBA and the Land Bank for the improvements in the audit outcomes. We will appreciate that the Land Bank was qualified in the previous year and was able to resolve the areas of qualification and move to a clean audit outcome. We have also noted entities that have regressed, namely the FIC. The FIC is one of those entities that has demonstrated and has achieved a clean audit opinion for 2 consecutive periods. And to the extent that they have regressed, it's an area that we are highlighting and urging management and all those that exercise oversight to ensure that the action plans developed by management do translate into better audit outcomes going forward. So if we reflect on the FIC, the area of regression or that made them to regress was the findings that we identified on supply chain in the current year. Similarly, with the phase OMBAT, we identified supply chain management compliance findings there. The OPFA was also a clean entity, and the challenges of the OPFA are much more greater because we have identified findings not only on supply chain, but on expenditure management, on the quality of submitted financial statements. But also we wish to highlight that at an overall level, the achievement by the entity in terms of the APP is at a level of 33%. And if you reflect on the previous year, they had achieved 25% of their targets. So essentially here, Chairperson, we are highlighting this as an area where we need to intervene. There are entities that are stagnating or are remaining unchanged. And we wish to highlight in this regard, the GPAR, where we in the previous year reported material findings on SCM, and we are noting that in the current year, those findings continue. Also, consequence management is one of the challenging areas for the GPAR. As we reflect on these numbers, Chairperson, I think it's equally important that we link this to service delivery. So if you look at those that are larger in size, you will note that the PIC, as an example, has achieved about 77% of their overall core mandate targets. And we must commend them for that achievement. The National Treasury, from a performance point of view, has achieved 80% of their core APP targets. If we look at SARS, SARS has exceeded its annual collection target the target was about 1.5 trillion, and they achieved 1.6 trillion rands in the previous financial period, also achieving about 75% of their overall targets. So all in all, Chairperson, you are noting that the larger entities, in as much as they are struggling in the areas of financial reporting or supply chain, they are doing well insofar as their mandate is concerned, and we must commend them. So when you dissect the audit outcomes, one must start appreciating that there are areas where these entities or departments are doing well, and there are areas where we need to then intervene. If we go to the overall message, as indicated, 38% of our entities, largely the smaller ones, are then achieving the clean opinions. The larger ones, and here larger ones in terms of budget, National Treasury, SARS, and PIC, have then these material findings that impact on their ability to achieve a clean audit outcome. So if we take National Treasury, apart from the IFMS matter, on National Treasury, we are also reporting that the quality of submitted financial statements for audit requires improvement, as during the financial year audit, we did identify material findings in the submitted financial statements. Now, these material findings are similar to those that we had reported in previous years. And in actual fact, if we do an analysis over a 5-year period, we will note that there is this area where we have reported that the quality of financial statements is an area of concern. So we therefore wish to urge the committee, management, and also the oversight by the minister to ensure that we intervene and attend to this control or these control deficiencies when it comes to the quality of submitted financial statements. If we dissect that further, Chairperson, in terms of what are the root causes for that, we are noting that at National Treasury, there is a vacancy, or there are critical vacancies, in particular in the position of the CFO, the Chief Audit Executive, and others that my colleague had indicated, which have subsequently been filled after year end. So we therefore wish to urge management to ensure that those positions are filled. But furthermore, the action plans that are developed, we are urging management to ensure that those action plans address the root causes and such that we prevent then the recurrence of these findings. Similarly, at SARS and the PIC, then Chairperson, we have equally identified findings on the quality of the financial statements that have been submitted. And therefore, it's important that intervention is made in the form of action plans around this. The other areas of non-compliance, Chairperson, that are critical to highlight is the area of supply chain management, where GPA, the FIC, the OPFA, FFC, as well as Phase Ombud, have then material findings in the current financial year. On consequence management, equally, we are noting that GPA continues to be an entity where the consequence management processes are not effective. And essentially, when you want to reflect on what work has been performed on previously identified irregular expenditure, you then note that not much would have taken place in a financial year. In terms of performance information, Chairperson, we are also then noting that there are two entities, namely GTEC and CBDA, where there were material findings on usefulness and reliability of the reported performance information. And these material findings are only confined to specific indicators, Chairperson. It's not the entire performance report. In our report, we then indicate which indicators are impacted by the usefulness and reliability findings. And what this simply means, Chairperson, is that for us as auditors, for those specific indicators where we're unable to express an opinion on the accuracy, validity, as well as the completeness of the stated performance by the particular entity. Furthermore, Chairperson, what we are noting is that at National Treasury, DBSA and PIC, we did identify material findings on their performance reports that were submitted for audit. But those identified findings were subsequently corrected, and therefore what you have then in the annual report is not materially misstated. And for that reason then, Chairperson, we are just raising a risk here to say where we are starting to identify then these misstatements, it is important that action plans are equally developed to ensure that going forward, these misstatements do not recur, but also do not then ultimately impact the quality of the performance reported by those entities. In our report, Chairperson, appreciating the vast nature of the audit process and the focus areas, we are then focusing our message on 9 areas. And in focusing on these 9 areas, one is then able to appreciate that there are areas where some of the entities are doing well, and then there are areas where we need to strengthen and improve as we go forward. The first area of those 9, Chairperson, is the area of performance information, the setting of targets, and whether those targets align to the strategic documents of the country, whether it's your NDP, it's your MTSF, and most importantly, their mandates in terms of their legislation. So we have, as part of the culture shift strategy, Chairperson, audited this alignment and to identify if there are any gaps. And what we are noting, Chairperson, as we are in this first year of auditing this particular area in this level of detail, is that at a high level, there is alignment between what is measured on the APP, the APRs, the threat plans, with the national documents. So at a high level, there is that level of alignment. However, the completeness of these indicators is an area that we are going to be focusing on more as we go forward. In other words, we are going to say, if at an MTSF level, you had 5 outcome indicators, are we seeing a direct link and that all 5 are reflected? And are we seeing the quantitative and qualitative measurements of some of these indicators, such that ultimately when that 5-year period comes to an end, we are then able to look at those outcomes, whether they have been achieved or not. So that body of work, Chairperson, is what we are intending to be performing as we go forward. And we will then be sharing those insights in terms of those APPs. What is important, Chairperson, to highlight in terms of annual performance as well is that 38% of the entities within the portfolio are achieving 80% and above of their targets. And National Treasury in this regard is leading the way. So we must commend the department for this achievement, together with all the entities such as the GTEC, the FSCA, which are really achieving the FIC in terms of the targets that they have set out on an annual basis. We then have a second quadrant, which is those that are achieving between 60% and 80%. And that is about 50% of the auditees. But appreciating that the SARS, the likes of SARS, PIC, as I've indicated earlier, have also done exceedingly well insofar as their performance for the current year. We are lastly then highlighting that the OPFA has achieved 33% of their core targets. And again, this achievement then simply means we need to ensure that there's sufficient intervention to address some of the challenges within the entity, appreciating that in the previous year, they had recorded achievement at the level of 25%. Similarly, Chairperson, we are highlighting the GPAR as one of those entities from a performance point of view where intervention also needs to be made. We have highlighted this to the management team, but equally, I think it's important to flag that in the current year, they have achieved 65% of their overall mandate targets. If you dissect that 65%, you'll actually see, Chairperson, when it comes to those indicators that relate to payments of claims on time, you know that the achievement level there is at 38%. And here we are then reflecting on public servants and their dependents who are reliant after having served the country on their pensions and the timely processing of those pensions. So ultimately, the impact that these delays are bringing is such that it can be catastrophic to some of these families. So this is an area that does require intervention, and we are highlighting, Chair. The second area, Chairperson, that we look at in terms of our focus area is the area of governance and stability. I think, Chairperson, there is sufficient evidence even in this report to show that in entities where there is stability and the positions that are critical to that organization are filled, we see better performance from those. And so we highlight then these challenges. But if you look at the portfolio itself, we must commend again the minister for ensuring that there is stability. If you look across the portfolio, the positions are mostly filled and there is then that level of leadership and attending to issues that are raised. Case in point would be the IRBA and the Land Bank, where we noted the new board, and the new board made significant improvements in their first year, having joined the organization, where they are now clean in terms of the overall audit outcomes. Similarly, Chairperson, I think ours is to highlight then the areas or those vacancies where we believe we need to focus more on. GTech as a government component has a vacancy at the level of the accounting officer. The GPower one has subsequently been filled. We must commend the minister and the DG in this regard as well. If we reflect on the CBDA, also I think it's important that we intervene and make sure that there is the stability there. At the CFO level, we are equally then highlighting that National Treasury, GPA, PIC, and ERBA have vacancies at a CFO level. And certainly you can then draw a link for some of these entities with the quality of financial statements that are received, as we have noted material misstatements at National Treasury, GPA, and the PIC. It's important to highlight as well, Chairperson, that the OCPO and the OAG position have subsequently been filled. Chairperson, the message ultimately is let's work together to ensure that these positions are filled with appropriately qualified personnel and ensure stability in these entities. On expenditure management, here, Chairperson, we are reflecting at an overall level on the irregular expenditure as well as fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The picture is somewhat positive, Chairperson, in the sense that we are noting that there is a reduction at an overall level of the irregular expenditure. In the previous year, the irregular expenditure was 171 million. This has reduced to a value of 122 million. If you further analyze this 122 million, you will note that 84% of that amount is contributed by National Treasury, by GTech, as well as GPA. And further analysis of National Treasury, you will see that in the current year, we did not identify new contracts or new instances of non-compliance. And therefore, this irregular expenditure you are noting from National Treasury is a continuation of contracts that were previously identified as irregular in previous years. So what that simply tells us is that National Treasury has developed an effective action plan to address supply chain management findings, because 2 years back, we were raising material findings and non-compliances. Management led by the DG has implemented adequate action plan, and essentially in the current year, there is no new irregular expenditure. The same picture we find when we look at the GTech. There is no new instances, or there are no new instances of irregular expenditure, but rather a continuation of previously identified contracts. So we must commend the work that is being done in this regard, as well as the oversight by this committee in terms of these action plans. At GPA, however, we did identify new irregular expenditure to the value of about 43 million rands. So what it simply tells us is that GPA and the action plans that they've developed are not effective to address the challenges that we have identified in previous years, but also to ensure there's compliance with the legislative framework.
Sorry, Lwazi. Sorry, Chair. I just want to just caution my colleague in terms of the time, since we are still on the slide 10, that there's still like more agenda items that are coming through. If you can also be cautious of the time in terms of the presentation, that would be great. Thank you, Buti.
No, thank you, Nambagamo.
Yes. Try to move faster, Lwazi. As you can see, we have got almost 2 sessions today.
No, noted, Chairperson, noted. And I will be covering the overall message. And I think, Chairperson, on National Treasury, we've spoken to the fruitless and wasteful expenditure that is associated with the IFMS project. In terms of material irregularities, one is also addressed that we have scoped in National Treasury for implementation of the PAA insofar as material irregularities as well as DBSA. And with the 2 entities that we've scoped in, there's only one material irregularity, National Treasury on IFMS, and one is then given the status. So that investigation, Chairperson, that I had indicated by the SIU is currently in progress, and we then await the outcomes of that process. JIPA, Chairperson, I think it's important to stress the fact that on consequence management, we had noted control deficiencies insofar as the processes for consequence management. In the current year, we are equally raising this non-compliance, indicating that JIPA is one of those entities where there was insufficient evidence supporting investigations conducted in the current year. The quality of submitted financial statements, Chairperson, one has equally highlighted the entities where there are challenges and the need for us to, one, fill the vacancies and also ensure that the action plans are one, addressing root causes, but 2, that those action plans are implemented timeously. The reviews by internal audit and various audit committees become also critical to ensuring that the quality of submitted financial statements is at the level required. And this exercise must be one that we attend to throughout the year and not necessarily at the end of the year when these financial statements are submitted for audit. On performance information, Chairperson, I have indicated as well here the challenges at GTEC and CBDA, and the fact that there are indicators here where we could not then confirm the validity of the reported performance information. From a financial health point of view, Chairperson, there are entities within the portfolio where increased oversight is going to be important. We have been engaging even in the previous year on the land bank and are then noting that the challenges at the land bank still remain. And therefore there's a need to ensure that we have the turnaround strategy implemented such that we can then see this entity fulfilling its mandate and servicing the country. We are also raising the fact that in the financial statements of National Treasury, there is 22 billion that is disclosed in the form of guarantees to entities within the portfolio. And those guarantees are to the Reserve Bank, the Land Bank, as well as the DBSA. The risk with any guarantee, Chair, is that it can be called upon by the lenders. And therefore, once that or when that happens, it simply means that you will have to divert the little resources the department has to then meet those obligations. So what is important with this guarantees, Chairperson, is to ensure that we strengthen the oversight over the entities where the debt is sitting and to ensure that that risk does not then materialize. We also saw in the current year, Chairperson, National Treasury providing financial support in the form of an equity injection to SASRIA. And this was to assist SASRIA with the solvency challenges that it was faced with, emanating from the riots in some parts of KZN and Gauteng. From an ICT point of view, Chairperson, we are giving a clean bill of health for the portfolio. Of course, we are noting areas where management has to intervene, but in particular, GPA with the paper-based system and the modernization process that is currently underway, it's important that that project is fully implemented such that the efficiencies that are needed in managing these pension benefits are realized. We've also highlighted the IFMS project, which is a critical project to ultimately ensure that there are efficiencies insofar as financial reporting at a government level is concerned. And key interventions here, Chair, is to ensure that there's alignment with all the stakeholders, in particular DPSA, SETA. There's an MOU that is currently outstanding that is critical for the successful implementation of this particular project. But furthermore, the resources that are needed then to implement and configure the licenses that have been purchased becomes important, and therefore we are impressing upon management to attend to this. Chairperson, as I close, I wish to then summarize our recommendations and our root causes. I've covered them as one has gone through the presentation, but I think it's important to highlight the vacancies that are there and the need for us to fill those. The action plans, those action plans must address the root causes to ensure that there are no repeat findings. The review processes of our financial statements become an area of importance, and we are calling upon the internal audit functions, the audit committees, to play a greater role in this area of financial statements. But lastly, Chair, I think on procurement, in as much as we are seeing the positive movements of most of the entities within the portfolio, there are those instances where the preventative controls are not adequate. And we sometimes in our testing find a tender awarded to an incorrect bidder due to the review processes that are not adequate. Recommendations, Chair, mirror what we have said to the committee in the previous year, of course, with this added layer of service delivery as well. So I think from a portfolio committee point of view or SCOF point of view, we must commend again the work that you are doing in this regard. The report, I will stop at this point. The report, we do then unpack further the service delivery performance of the various entities and some of the challenges. We also speak to coordinating ministries. What we are simply saying on these coordinating ministries is that we are now looking at the role of National Treasury and the provincial treasuries, in particular in the area where they are supporting municipalities. And we are looking at how effective is the support and oversight that they are playing. We are not doing so, Chairperson, merely from a point of raising findings to these departments, but we are doing so, Chair, to say, if we could partner up and ensure that these interventions and initiatives are adequate and are effective, we could see a greater impact insofar as municipalities and various other entities. So I think, Chairperson, there will be greater messaging from our side in terms of coordinating ministries, and we will be sharing some of the areas where we say then we need to improve upon. One area that I would want to state is the fact that the quality of the APP indicators in relation to municipal support and oversight is an area that needs to be enhanced. We see that these treasuries in some instances measure the quantitative aspect, which is if I can give an example, the number of reports generated or the number of meetings attended or the number of advisors deployed. What we are simply saying, Chairperson, is that if we could enhance that and measure ultimately what impact emanates from that intervention and what.
Okay, thanks, Lwazi. Are you done from the side of AG with the presentation, Ms. Matanzima?
Thank you so much, Chair. Yes, we are done with the presentation, and then it over to you, back to you.
Okay, thanks very much. After having gone through item 1 of apologies, I received a letter from the minister apologizing that is busy with the preparation for tabling of the budget tomorrow, and also apologize for the acting DG, Mr. Momo Ishmael, who's attending FATF in the US. You remember FATF that we dealt with their business last year with the General Laws Amendment Bill, trying to make sure that the country complies. I think in the platform, there's an acting DG, Duncan Peterson. The delegation of National Treasury is led by the Deputy Minister, Dr. Mason. You are welcome, Dr. Mason. Let's take questions, comments from honorable members. I see Dr. George. Over to you, Dr. George.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks very much for the presentation. The National Treasury is responsible for financial management. They've got, the Constitution sets out clearly what they need to do. They've got wide-ranging powers if entities do not comply with measures that they have put into place. So I think that the expectation that the National Treasury should operate at a high or higher standard than most other entities, I think that's a reasonable expectation. And it is disappointing when they do not do that, because then it does bring into question their ability to actually manage the public finances as effectively as we would want them to do it. So I think that is something that needs to be improved on. Crucially, the issue of guarantees was mentioned. Now, I want to know from the Auditor-General and also from the National Treasury, is that, do you know the actual total size of all of the guarantees from Treasury to all of the various entities that it may have guaranteed? Because that is something that may very well come back and bite us at some point. Because if that gets out of control, as was mentioned in the report, is that a guarantee can be called on, and then it needs to be paid. And then if it gets too high or unaffordable, frankly, it will crowd out service delivery to the detriment of the most vulnerable South Africans. So I want to know whether we actually have got that very clearly in mind and under control. And then also my second question regards debt obligations. Now we know that the National Treasury, or the minister is about to take a huge amount of, well, hundreds of billions of Eskom's debt onto the national balance sheet. So what I want to know is that the debt, whether we know what the full debt obligations are of all of the entities that report to the Treasury. So do we have that under control? In other words, we know this is the extent of all the debt obligations. Because obviously, if we lose sight of that, that can very, very easily get out of control. So those are my two questions around the guarantees and around the actual debts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. George. Let me take Honorable Morolong and Mhlonphe Skhosana.
Well, Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity, and let me greet all colleagues in the platform. Let me hasten to say that I want to tread on the side of caution because some of my questions may encroach on the next presentation by National Treasury. So I'm quite mindful of the fact that these questions may have some effect on the next presentation. But I wanted to know what is the AG's position with respect to the fact that there's been no detail provided on the jobs funds. What is their take on the fact that there has been no detail provided by National Treasury on the job fund? The second question, Chair, is the exemption of the land bank by the executive. If we can just be given some elaboration on the exact invocation of that law that would have been used to exempt the land bank. I agree with the AG with respect to, and I fully concur. I believe that the intervention in municipalities must be integrated, they must be effective, and the technical support and all related support must be impactful. I agree that there must be a meeting of minds and working together by the AG and National Treasury to ensure that these interventions are as impactful as they should be. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ramrolo.
No, Thokoza Stalo. And greetings to everybody in the meeting. Yeah, Chair, I share the same sentiment with Honorable George that I think the National Treasury as a department which is responsible for financial management, obviously our expectations are very high on it, especially when it coming to the issues of audit opinions and stuff like that. I think all other departments are looking at the National Treasury, other spheres of government like your municipalities who are facing serious challenges but are looking up to the National Treasury. State-owned enterprises are looking up to National Treasury. So obviously, I think our expectations, all of us, to the National Treasury is very high. We're expecting National Treasury as a department itself, I think, to do much better than everybody else. So I think, but if the National Treasury is not performing expected, obviously we are all going to be disappointed. And it looks like entities that falls under the National Treasury are performing even better than the National Treasury itself. And it's quite disappointing. However, I think we need to congratulate, I think the entities, I think that they performed very well, especially those that received clean audit, which this year I can see that there are 6, but also even those that received unqualified with matters, which are 9. I think it's also good. We hope that in the next year they will also move to clean audit. Just one last matter, because well, other issues I think they would need the National Treasury itself to respond to. Just on the issue of audit action plan, I want to check with the Auditor-General in relation to their role that they play in monitoring the audit action plan of any department or of any entity. For instance, if you look at GPA, I think they've indicated that GPA has also in the year under review got a new irregular expenditure on top of what it had in the previous year. So my question is, because obviously after this, after the issuing of audit opinions, I think there will be audit action plans that are done by various entities or departments. So to what extent is the Auditor-General monitoring those audit action plans? Because I think if there's thorough monitoring, I think we wouldn't expect the recurrence or the continuous the continuous action, the continuous negative action from such entities. That, for instance, if JIPA is having a regular expenditure, which was a finding, and then they were told that please work on this, but in the following year, still there's a new irregular expenditure. So to what extent is the AG do monitoring on the audit action plan? Thank you very much, Chair.
Any other member who want to make an input or ask questions? I don't see anyone on the platform. Okay. Thanks very much, colleagues. And as you have noted, let's acknowledge the progress that is there in a land bank, because it will not be proper that we keep quiet when land bank has had so many problems in the past, and they have done so well this time around. So let's congratulate the board and the management and all the staff of land bank. And the same applies with ERBA, which has done so well in terms of clean audit. And as Honorable Kosane has alluded, let's also commend the work done by those entities that have received unqualified audit, because that in itself shows that the management and the board of those entities have done well under difficult circumstances, and show disappointment with the regression when it comes to other entities, and including the department itself, National Treasury. So let me hand over to back to AG to respond to those questions that have been asked by honorable members.
Thank you so much, honorable members, for the questions, and I will also allow my colleagues to come through during the process to respond, but I will try to respond to others. In terms of Honorable George, Dr. George, you highlighted one of the comments on your comments that your expectation by National Treasury should lead by example, and that was supported as well by the Honorable Skosana. We also have the same view as Auditor-General. But to answer your first question relating to the total guarantees of all total guarantees in terms of National Treasury, the current that have been disclosed is 400 billion as the total guarantees that have been disclosed on the consolidation of the financial statements of all the public entities. In terms of Honorable Skosana as well, in terms of the audit action plans, what is the role that the AG is playing in terms of the action plans? We do play a very critical role in terms of the reviewing of the audit action plans. So every auditee, they normally provide the audit action plans for us to review to ensure that it is a real root cause based, and as well it addresses what our findings. So we do have an input in those audit action plans to ensure that they address our findings. However, I just want to note that although there should be an action plan in place to address the findings, what is really important is for the auditors to have preventable internal controls that should be in place to ensure there is non-recurrence. So those internal controls should be embedded as part of their day-to-day operations. So for me, that is important. And then in terms of the Honorable Morolong, in terms of the land bank, the exemption, Nicholas will take you that through us, and also in terms of the job fund that not been met, Lwazi will also respond to that relating to the job fund. I will hand over now to Nicholas to take us through on the exemption in terms of the land bank, and Lwazi on the job fund.
Well, thank you, Chairperson, and thanks, Nopakam. Good morning, honorable members. Yes, in terms of the land bank, the minister has exempted land bank in terms of section 92 of the PFMA from complying with section 52 of the PFMA. Section 52 requires the public entities to submit the corporate plan, meaning that the minister has exempted land bank from submitting corporate plan. Reason being, the reason that was given was that the land bank should focus on curing the default, meaning that they should finalize the liability solution so that they can that should be their priority. You know, simply put, like the land bank has been exempted from submitting corporate plan in terms of the section 22 of the PFMA. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Through you on the question on the jobs fund. Chairperson, I think the jobs fund is a project that is now at its tail end. There was a period or a phase where there were various projects that were approved. There were targets for the number of jobs to be created. National Treasury has exceeded those targets. Where the project is, as I indicate, at the tail end, it's a question of closing on the financial commitments or contractual commitments that exist for those projects. So if you reflect on the annual report of the department, as well as the indicators that are there, they are then limited to the financial claims that need to be settled and the targets associated with that. Then, Chair, there was equally a question on the total debt. Of course, I think the total debt sits in various places. And the answer to that question will be one that might require us to embark on an exercise, because you have debt that is sitting at the National Revenue Fund level, which is the direct borrowings that the government would make, where in particular we have the budget deficits or specific projects. But similarly, Chair, we then have debt in various then public entities. And so one would have to consolidate that. The challenge currently is that we do have a consolidated set of financial statements for public entities, but the overall opinion we have issued as the AGSA on those financial statements is a disclaimer. And that then becomes a limiting factor for us in terms of providing then a reliable number on how much debt at a country level we then have. Okay, but I think certainly we can provide an indication, but it would not be an accurate or a complete value, as it were. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure, Honorable Chair, if members have all the responses have been addressed.
Thanks. I see Dr. George has a follow-up question. Dr. George.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much for the information on the guarantees. That is very useful. I do want to have a follow-up on the debt, and thanks very much also for your reply on that. Yeah, I agree with you. It is complicated because of the fact that the financials are disclaimed. So, you know, obviously we don't know whether that is actually an accurate reflection. But we all know that the issue of debt is an enormous one. And it is exceptionally troubling to think, and I mean, anybody in South Africa, I think, would agree with me, is that it's very troubling to think that we do not know how much debt we actually have. It's like having a household and you don't know how much debt you've got. So, you know, what's going to come down the track? I mean, that's not prudent fiscal financial management by a long shot. So I was pleased to hear, though, that it would be possible for us to get an indication of where we think that number is, despite the fact that some might be disclaimed. I think that's vitally important because it is likely quite high. So I would like to get that, Chair, because I think that would be very instructive for us as a committee to exercise our oversight effectively. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. George. It looks like that's the only follow-up question. Over to you, AG.
Thank you so much as well, Honorable Chair, as well as Dr. George, Honorable Dr. George. Yes, we will definitely share that information relating to the debt obligations of the country and after this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Let's move to the next item, which is also linked to this presentation. That is item 4, briefing by the National Treasury on their 2021-22 annual report. Over to you, Deputy Minister, Dr. Mason.
Cancer Chair, and good morning. Finance Committee Chair, Honorable Joe Maswanganyi, and committee members, AG, and all my colleagues in the National Treasury, and everyone present on these platforms. Chair, in addition to the Minister's apology and the acting AG, other DDGs are also not here due to the preparations for the budget tomorrow. But management, it's well represented here by Dr. Duncan Petersen, who's also a DDG for asset and liabilities, but is standing here on behalf of the acting DG. He is also accompanied by Laura. So we really want to thank you for this opportunity for us to present the annual report for the financial year 2021-2022. So like I said, Dr. Duncan Petersen, Laura, they will be helping us to take through the committee and the public at large on our annual report for the financial year 2021-2022. And I think we'll also deal with the debt situation, which was a question asked by Dr. George. And I think the minister tomorrow, he will say more about this question. So we will not get into the detail on the current situation until the minister has presented the budget tomorrow on this debt situation, because we know the situation very well, and we've been reporting continuously on our debt situation as the sovereign, including the contingent liabilities that we have arising out of the state-owned entities. But like I'm saying, will not want to venture into that in detail because the minister is presenting the budget tomorrow, which will lay out in detail our debt situation. But the management, I mean, the acting DG would also say a few words on that, but without getting into what the minister will be presenting tomorrow. And Chair, I would like to be excused later in the day to also attend to some of the budget preparation tasks. So possibly by the time you deal with SARS, I may not be with you. If you allow me to join the teams which are working on the budget, which will be presented tomorrow. So with those few words, Chair, because I don't really want to make long remarks because we really don't have time, I will now hand over to Dr. Duncan Pieterse and his team to take us through the National Treasury Annual Report for financial year 2021-2022. Over to you, Duncan, and thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, and good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. Thank you for this opportunity to share our annual report progress with you. As the Deputy Minister has indicated, I'm the acting DG at the moment. Unfortunately, DG Mamoniat is traveling due to FATF obligations. So he is unfortunately unable to join us today. Honorable Chair, before we get into the presentation, I thought I would just make a few remarks, and in particular to respond to some of the questions that were raised in the previous session, as the Deputy Ministers indicated. The first question, Honorable Chair, related to whether we know the full debt obligations of both the state as well as state-owned entities. And I think it's just important for me to clarify this issue, because I do think it is an important matter. The Deputy Minister did say that the full details will be provided tomorrow, but I do think it's important for the honourable members to be aware of the fact that in Chapter 8 of the Budget Review, we have a table 8.2 that in quite a bit of detail articulates the borrowing requirement of the major state-owned companies. And that will be part of the budget review that will be published tomorrow. So in that table, the members would be able to get a sense of the domestic loans, short-term and long-term, as well as the foreign loans that state-owned companies are exposed to currently, and their future borrowing plans. So I just wanted to correct that, because I didn't want us to create the impression that that information is not published and is not available. An update in that regard will be provided tomorrow. There was also a question, Chair, on the size of total guarantees. And again, similarly to the gross borrowing requirement of the major state-owned companies, we also have a table in the budget review, table 7.10, that articulates also in lots of detail the government guarantee exposure, both for public institutions, Eskom, Sanral, and so on, but also the government guarantee exposure relating to the IPP program and relating to any public-private partnerships. We break that down in quite a bit of detail in table 7.10. So I wanted to just give Honorable George the comfort that in terms of guarantees and in terms of the borrowing requirement of state-owned companies, that information is available and will again be published tomorrow. And my colleague Laura, Chair, will also speak to the Jobs Fund issue, which is another question that was raised. Chair, we do have a presentation that will go into quite a bit of detail on our performance, as well as some perspectives on the IFMS issue. We do agree with the honourable members that the National Treasury does have a responsibility for excellence in this regard when it comes to financial oversight, and we do take that responsibility very seriously. And we do agree with the AG that insofar as IFMS is concerned, the program does offer long-term benefits, both for our department, but for government as a whole. So what we're going to do in our presentation, Chair and honourable members, is we're going to take the members through just a bit of the context on the IFMS program, some of the challenges, acknowledging some of the challenges that we've experienced along the way, and then focus very much on the way forward in terms of how we plan to deal with this project and how we plan to rectify the current situation. So let me now, Honourable Chair, with your permission, hand over to Laura, who will be taking us through the presentation. We are supported, Chair, by other colleagues as well, Dikeledi and Sandile. And we are all here to both go through the presentation with you, but also answer any questions you may have at the end. Thanks, Chair. With your permission, I'll now hand over to Laura to take us through the presentation. Thank you. Laura, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to the committee. In the interest of audio, I'll be switching off my video. Thank you for providing us with this opportunity to present the department's performance for the period 2021-22. This presentation to the committee stands as the cornerstone of the department's accountability and compliance measures. NT received a qualified audit for the period under review, as has been discussed. This was wholly due to the disputed treatment of the IFMS technical support and maintenance payment. National Treasury is of the view that the annual payment made in accordance with the legally binding contract does not constitute fruitless and wasteful expenditure. However, the AGSA took the stance that NT should have recorded the 68 million annual payment as such, as well as that National Treasury was incorrect to remove the balance, resulting in an understatement of 400 million. To reiterate, the support and maintenance fees are paid annually as determined by the contract to ensure that the IFMS has access to the latest versions of the software, security patches which are critical to risk reduction, software patches, and specialized technical support. If the contract is not honoured as per the terms and conditions, the significant discount Treasury negotiated will be lost. In addition, penalties will have to be paid. And at the time of reinstating support and maintenance, the back pay amount to the date of cancellation will have to be paid as a further penalty. Importantly, evidence of utilisation of the support and maintenance was provided. However, the audit measure applied calculated licence utilisation at the future point of full implementation. This effectively means that whilst the audit was on support and maintenance, the finding was on the licenses, and would have resulted, if Treasury continues the contract, effectively results in fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and if Treasury was not to continue the contract, would result in the same. In terms of the performance of IFMS, the implementation is entirely dependent on the appointment of a service provider to implement the pilot rollout in 2 departments in 2 provinces prior to full national implementation. Unfortunately, CETA was again unable to conduct a successful procurement, the 3rd such time since 2018-19. As the committee will know, in terms of legislative prescripts, Treasury is wholly reliant on CETA for this procurement. Given the antiquated legacy systems such as Persal and BAS, and considering the cost of maintaining these systems, the department is of the view that there is no alternative but to successfully implement IFMS. Mitigation measures are being taken to accelerate the implementation of the critical modernization and automation of financial management systems. In respect of the IFMS-related expenditure on technical support and maintenance, the department is of the view that exercising our right in respect of the audit objection process is in the interest of government-wide treatments of such large-scaled, co-managed, multi-year complex projects. The audit 2021-22, the AG has recognized that despite the challenges of IFMS, Treasury did show significant improvement in the risk areas of supply chain management, transversal contracts, information technology, and filling vital vacancies. The achievement Treasury achieved in terms of performance was 77.78%. The final score was slightly lower than the initial 80 because of the audit outcomes, which is a target of Treasury's, and the department spent 62.37 billion, which equates to 98% of our appropriated budget of 63.647 billion. In terms of irregular expenditure, the department recorded 30.689 million, a year-on-year reduction from the previous year. Importantly, there was no new irregular expenditure transactions in the current financial year, confirming the effectiveness of the department's internal controls. Noting that the committee has planned to conduct a site visit on IFMS, however, we have given the significance and consequences of IFMS to NT, we have provided the committee with the context of the project, noting that IFMS will be modernizing and automating the current legacy systems maintained by National Treasury's financial system. These include Persal, that pays 1.5 million salaries monthly and 12.6 million citizen SASSA payment files. It also includes BAS, which handles 1.5 million daily transactions with 39,000 users, and Logos, that the provisioning and stock administration system that processes on average 178,000 transactions monthly with around 34,000 users. And finally, Vulindlela with 45,000 monthly reports being issued. The cost of maintaining the legacy systems is significant. These systems are inflexible and technologically and functionally they are archaic, with limited support and resources available to provide the support. Whilst implementation is a joint responsibility, spending accountability rests solely with Treasury. Having said that, Treasury welcomes the communication we have received from the DPSA, recommitting themselves to IFMS and its implementation, and that they will be part of the pilot as we roll it out. The various IFMS challenges have been established, are well known, and have been re-emphasized here today, including the failure of CETA. However, NT has taken significant steps to overcome these challenges to implement, to accelerate implementation and address the AGSA's findings. At this moment, I just want to pause, and I'm going to ask the DG IFMS, Ms. Dikeledi Libya, just to indicate where we are in terms of progress. And that progress will, we believe, in the main, address the concerns that have been raised by the AG. Dikeledi, if you can please come in.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, Honorable Chair, committee members, and other colleagues. I'll switch off my audio in the interest of, the video in the interest of the audio. So good, in terms of the progress of the IFMS, we procured the licenses, which is the software, in 2016. We then moved further to the next phase, which was to look at conduct an assessment on the policy gap analysis to ensure that all our policies within government that needs to be effected onto the program and the system are aligned with what has been procured in a little more detail. That was completed. Where we found ourselves being challenged was moving to the next phase, which was to ensure now that our system is configured. The software that we procured in 2016 is configured and available for use within departments. The approach was that we will start by accelerating the implementation of some of the key modules, as well as piloting the system within a sample of departments to ensure that it is ready for rollout nationally. Due to the challenges that we faced with regards to procurement, we were not able to successfully appoint a service provider to start with such configuration and implementation of the system at pilot departments. That's where we are in terms of the IFMS. We're still re-looking at procuring the service provider for us to start the implementation of the system at pilot departments before we roll it out nationally within public service. We also have taken into account the recommendations of the Auditor-General with regards to the negotiations in respect of the current contract to address the perceived fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Those negotiations are currently underway with the service provider in order to implement those recommendations from the Auditor-General. Part to that is also the consideration on the implementation of the cloud solution due to the latest technology and the modernized technologies that currently exist in the market, in line with what has been procured in 2016. We therefore are looking forward to ensuring that the implementation of the IFMS becomes a success. The negotiations are in an advanced stage, and the Treasury has put in measures in place to ensure that the perceived fruitless and wasteful expenditure is addressed, and these negotiations have already been entered into and we planning to be concluded before the start of the new financial year. Thank you. I will hand over back to my colleague, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dikeledi. In terms of Treasury's annual performance, the department achieved 77.78% of our planned outcomes, with 8 indicators being partially achieved and 4 not achieved. Combined, this means we did not achieve 22% of our indicators. Noting that Treasury does not have a one-on-one relationship between program and division, it is for this reason that Treasury monitors both at a programmatical level and a divisional level. In terms of divisions, economic policy, tax and financial sector policy, international and financial relations, and civil military pension contributions to funds and other benefits all achieved 100% of their indicators for the reporting period. When reflecting on the underperformance, it is evident that in a number of cases, this is due to input dependencies or measuring processes. Given that NT is a policy department and recognizing value chains of service delivery, we understand the risk that we do measure a number of delivery areas that are not wholly in NT's control, but which are critical to delivering on our mandates and obligations. Program 1 achieved 60% of their indicators. Importantly, the last financial year's focus on risk has had an impact, having attained a maturity level of 5. The department partially achieved our training and development budget. This was due to capacity constraints in supply chain. These have, however, been and are continuing to be addressed, as well as course dates being changed, which then results due to operational reasons having to be cancelled. Economic policy, tax, financial regulations and research achieved 100% of the indicators. Importantly, 50 papers were published in partnership with the SA Tide program. Issues that previously have been discussed with this committee and members have raised as critical included that analysis and research on growth policy, including having made progress on the macroeconomic review and monetary and exchange rate policy was achieved. Feasible labour market reforms were investigated to boost employment and research and analysis support provided for policies to address inequality and implement gender-based budgeting and labour market policy support. Substantive and impactful technical support was provided to Operation Vulindlela. Quarterly economic and revenue forecasts were produced with associated scenarios highlighting the primary risks, as well as evaluation of tax and expenditure proposals. Together with the South African Reserve Bank, participating banks and other stakeholders, work was done on the bounce back scheme, including and importantly leveraging off the lessons from the loan guarantee scheme, which were previously discussed with this committee. Amongst other reports, importantly, we produced South Africa Financial Ombud Systems Diagnostic, which was published as an independent review of the South African Financial Ombud System, as well as reforms to enhance consumer protection and good quality outcomes in the financial sector, service sector. We also, this program also coordinated the processing of bills and most importantly led the multi-departmental and agency response to address the weaknesses identified by the mutual evaluation peer review of the country's anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism systems conducted by the Financial Action Task Team. Program 3, which is Public Finance and Budget Management, this includes Public Finance, Budget Office, as well as IGR. They achieved 54% of their indicators, although it is important to note that the underperformance in this program is almost wholly due to delays in inputs into the delivery process. This included Parliament scheduling the tabling of MTBPS outside of the planned period. Township economic development strategies were completed by NT, but are waiting for approval by municipal councils. Financial recovery plans having been completed and submitted by NT in the ascribed 90-day period, but municipalities' own consultation processes stretched beyond that period. Cabinet memos have been received on the day that they were due for submission, and the Jobs Fund disbursements was negatively affected by low economic growth, the pandemic, social unrest, and mainly as a result of the land bank challenge in providing the requisite matching funds, as they are the primary partner in the agricultural round of support. It is important to note that as part of the Jobs Fund's stringent monitoring and controls, they only disperse funds when targets are achieved, including availability of matching funds and project spending. In terms of Program 3, the key performance delivery that was achieved included the national budget process was effectively led in a time of severe fiscal constraints. The focus remained on strengthening public finance in this area, as well as our focus on infrastructure development continued to be a priority given its catalytic impact on economic growth. To this end, the Development Infrastructure Fund was led, including the operational and governance framework, as well as its integration into the budget process, and the PPP framework review aimed at implementing efficiencies in the regulatory process to attract increased private sector investment and build a pipeline of blended finance projects was completed. Importantly, in terms of local government, the diagnostic phase of the review of local government capacity building system was finalized Policies were updated to further enhance the role of the private sector in financing municipal infrastructure, and a city support program continued to support economic development in metros, including to 7 metros on the integration of climate resilience in the project preparation process. The Jobs Fund, who's part of Program 3, continued to make a significant impact with its portfolio of 146 job creation projects, and it has exceeded across its lifespan to in its creation of permanent jobs. As of 31 March 2022, the fund has facilitated the creation of 185,967 permanent jobs, in excess of its 150,000 target. In addition, the fund's project partners have created 17,208 seasonal jobs that will endure well beyond the implementation period for these projects. 64,337 short-term jobs, 23,169 internships, and trained 285,670 people. To date, 9 funding rounds have been completed, and the process of continuing and redefining the lifespan of the Jobs Fund is well underway. Program 4, Assets and Liability Management, achieved a 92.31% of its targets, all bar 1, and that was due to resource constraints which have since been addressed. Importantly, the annual gross borrowing requirements have been financed, credit ratings have begun to stabilize, and appointments were made at boards at the PIC and Land Bank. Most importantly, and referring back to one of the original questions at the opening of this presentation, the implementation of the approved minimum criteria that must be met by state-owned entities and government departments when submitting requests for government guarantee is underway. When fully implemented, this will ensure that guarantees are issued only to SOEs that can clearly demonstrate their ability to serve the debt of the guarantees. Program 5, Financial Accounting and Supply Chain Management Systems, achieved 66.67% of their targets. This is an increase on previous years. They have obviously been negatively affected by IFMS, but equally in terms of systemic underperformance rather than poor performance. This is in respect of norms and standards, and this was due to, there was a reduced need, and that was why the target was not reached. And in terms of the strategic sourcing opportunities, there was a single sourcing delay in approval. Noted delivery was that the financial management grant was transferred to all 257 municipalities to assist with improving financial management and implementation of the MFMA. Support was provided through both assigning municipal technical advisors, as well as coordinating an extensive training program that includes having just over 1,250 interns across 257 municipalities, 9,500 municipal officials having access training in line with minimum competency levels, 31 trainee accountants currently enrolled in our Chartered Accountants Academy, and progress made in the development and professionalization of the SCM function. Importantly, National Treasury conducted 25 forensic investigations and 1 specialized performance audit report was published. Advisory services is extended to law enforcement agencies, the MPA, SAPS, in a number of criminal investigations of complex commercial crime cases, including the personal protective equipment investigations. A revised draft public procurement bill has been finalized, as the committee well knows, and the consultation with NEDLAC have since been completed. 35 transversal contracts were renewed, and importantly, the e-tender portal has been revamped to enhance reporting, which directly has a positive impact on accountability. And these enhancements include procurement planning and contract management functions, and 18,594 opportunities have been advertised on the portal. Institutions and municipalities that have required assistance in strengthening their SME functions and improving SCM performance have been identified and supported. The committee will know well the challenges in local government, and that this and the solutions to these challenges are complex, multidimensional, are contributed by multiple role players and stakeholders, and requires a value chain of interventions and cannot be ascribed to any single role player, least of all. In terms of Programme 6, International Financial Relations achieved 100% of their indicators as they continued to represent South Africa's interest in shaping regional and global policies that advance the economic, financial and development objectives of the country and Africa. Programme 7 achieved all the targets, noting that this relates to the SLA between National Treasury and JEPA specifically, and not the entirety of JEPA's operations. In terms of human capital, it is important to note to the committee that significant progress was made in filling critical vacancies, including that of the AG, the CPO, and the DDG economic policy. In respect of the two vacancies that were mentioned earlier in this session, Internal Audit Executive Treasury has conducted two recruitment processes. In terms of the which were unsuccessful, we are now in the third process, and we are between the shortlisting and interview stage. And in terms of the CFO, that process has been impacted on by a labour dispute process. In respect of the audited financial performance, we have provided you with the details, but suffice to say that Treasury has expended 98% of our budget. On that note, I'd like to hand back to the acting DG. Thank you, Duncan.
Thanks, Laura and Dikeledi. Honorable Chair and members, that's it from our side. So let me now hand back to yourself and the Deputy Minister. Thank you.
That's it, Chair, from our side. We'll take questions and guidance from the honorable members.
Okay, I think let me just hold the fort while the chairperson might be experiencing problems, and maybe just invite members to raise questions at this point or comments. Honorable members, any takers on the presentation? I note the hand of Honorable Morolong. Any other hand? Okay, go ahead, Honorable Morolong.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just going to focus on a few questions. I thought that National Treasury will, give us a sense of what is the future of the Jobs Fund. If we can just get that sense of what the future is of the Jobs Fund. But I had also elected that I would expect of National Treasury to answer this question. What is the impact on the financial markets of National Treasury having received a qualified audit opinion, particularly on the cost of debt? If we can get a sense of what is the roadmap towards the completion of the IFMS system. Also on the same IFMS system, what was the Zondo Commission conclusion on this matter?
And if there were any subsequent recommendations, whether they've been looked at and carried or implemented rather. I think for now, let me pause here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Honorable Skosan, you can come in.
No, thank you very much, Chair. We welcome the presentation by the National Treasury, starting from the remarks made by the Honorable Deputy Minister. Yeah, I think we can see that the overall achievement in terms of the APP indicators is up. It's almost at 78%, which is very good. Which means targets that are not achieved, they are only at about 22%. I think we really welcome and appreciate that from the side of the National Treasury. But now, having said that, coming back to the issue of which I think we made comments on earlier on the AG presentation, on the issue of the qualified audit opinion. I think it has appeared, I think, in this presentation that it looks like the issue of the IMFS project is the one that has really caused this qualified audit opinion. So just want to be certain that except the issue of IMFS project, what are other findings from the AG in relation to this audit opinion? Or are we really certain that if it was not for the IMFS project, the National Treasury was not going to get a qualified audit opinion? Lastly, Chair, on the issue of which the AG spoke about, the enhancement of municipal support and oversight by the National Treasury, I just want to know that in that area, how far has the National Treasury gone in terms of supporting municipalities and playing oversight role in that regard? Because I think we've seen, I think year in, year out, that when the AG make this audit topic, audit outcomes, I think in the sphere of local government, I think it's normally very bad. So how far has the National Treasury gone in terms of giving support and oversight in that particular regard? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Skosana. Can you come in, Honorable Dr. George?
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to ask about this dispute that there was between the Auditor-General and the National Treasury. I mean, it seems to be quite unfortunate that such a thing does in fact happen, because, one would expect that it was clear what the rules are and how they would be interpreted and how they would be applied, etc. Now, I mean, I suppose these things do happen. But what I want to know is that all clarified now, because, I mean, there has been quite a long delay and it does not look good, obviously. But I just want to know, what is the status of that now? Has there been a meeting of the minds, and are we going to see this going forward, or what really is the state of play over there? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Dr. George. Yes, I will hand over to the National Treasury. I take it that the Deputy Minister wants to take his leave anytime now, but we will start with him so that he can indicate if that is the case. However, I just want to indicate to the acting DG of Treasury, that we seem to have similar concerns as members regarding what is happening now when it comes to IFMS as far as the relations, in as far as it affects the relations between Treasury and AG. I know that this has been touched, but I think members of the committee who would like to get a confirmation as to where we are at right now and whether we are not going to be embarrassed as committee and not be able to present or talk to our own BRRR. And secondly, for me, the issue of capacity constraints in supply chain, I just want National Treasury to unpack that a bit. Does it mean officials who are there do not have the capacity? Because at the same time, I hear that there are some capacity building programs that are happening. Is it the case, or is it a case of vacancies? And if that is the case, we also hear that the department is in the process of dealing with those. Maybe they can expatiate a bit on that. Laura, you talk of employment that is created all around the country, and there are big numbers, 23,000 and so on and so forth. My question is, how are we impacting on the current unemployment rate in our country? And just for the future, when National Treasury deals with the issue of jobs and job creation, as members of the committee representing various constituencies, it would be prudent if we could get a sense of where these jobs are. And I'm happy that you're also able to differentiate between long-term and short-term job opportunities. However, we would love, as the committee, to know exactly where these are created and why and how it affects the rate of unemployment in our country. Right. Thank you very much. Over to you, Deputy Minister first.
No, thanks, Chair. Just to reiterate the point that we really agree with you that as National Treasury and Team Finance as a whole, we should be the best in terms of our financials as well as the performance information, and we'll seek to continuously improve in that regard. And we are committed to find a lasting solution insofar as the IFMS is concerned. And I think the colleagues shortly will deal with the details of how we're seeking to deal with that issue, including dealing with the questions that have been asked. Chair, it is at this stage that I would really like to be excused, as I indicated earlier, that I would really like the honorable members to grant me the permission to be excused so that I can also undertake certain tasks related to the budget tomorrow. At this stage, may I ask Duncan, the acting DG, and Nora to answer some of the questions, all the questions that have been asked. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, DM.
Duncan.
You are released, DM. I'm sorry I couldn't take your call. I was too late. Thank you so much. You are released indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Deputy Minister. Let me answer some of the questions, and then I will hand over to Laura and the team to come in on the others. There was a question, Chair, about the impact of the audit finding by the AG potentially on financial markets and things like the cost of borrowing and so on. As Luwazi indicated in his presentation, part of their practice in a situation like this is to inform us of this decision before the audit finding is concluded. And so upon receiving that information and as part of our engagements with the AG, we then also verified with various institutions whether this finding will have an impact, a material impact on things like the cost of borrowing in the financial markets, especially given that many of our funding instruments, our bonds, are listed instruments. We did do that work, Chair, and we are satisfied that there won't be any large material adverse consequences relating to this particular audit finding. And we did test it with various institutions, and we also did our own work. So that's just to give the honourable member that comfort. There was also a question on support to municipalities by National Treasury. We have various initiatives, Chair, in this regard, including, of course, one of our most significant programs, which is the City Support Program, where we work in particular with metros on various support initiatives. But one of the issues, Chair, that we will be emphasizing in tomorrow's budget review, and that the Minister will speak to as well in his speech, is around the work that we are doing, in particular on municipal revenue enhancement, and the importance of that work in light of some of the distress situation that many municipalities find themselves in. So we will be talking a little bit more to that tomorrow. I'll offer some initial thoughts, Chair, also on the supply chain management issues, and then I'm sure Laura will come in there. I think one of the challenges we had, and I would say at the beginning of this particular financial year, was certainly around capacity. As I think Laura's indicated, those capacity constraints have now been resolved in the supply chain management space. In fact, we also appointed a new director of supply chain management in the corporate services division, Mshloti, and she's, I think, helped us in terms of steadying the ship and in terms of doing the work required there to deal with some of the capacity challenges. And it remains a focus area for us because of the manner in which it impacts the rest of the divisions and our ability to deliver. And then I think, Chair, you had a question about, there was a question about the jobs and where they are and the impact. I assume that relates to specifically the work done by the Jobs Fund, and I'm sure that those details we can make available to the committee. Let me now, Chair, hand over to Laura and the team to deal with some of the other, or the rest of the questions that were asked, so that we make sure that we deal with them in a satisfactory manner. And I think the outstanding questions mainly related to IFMS. And so I'll invite Laura to talk to that, but just also to echo the words of the Deputy Minister and the point I made at the beginning, that I think we do take our responsibility for excellence in this regard of financial oversight and management very seriously, which is why we are working with the AG to make sure that we can resolve all matters relating to IFMS as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair. With your permission, allow me to hand over to Laura to deal with the rest of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Acting DG. In terms of the question related to the Jobs Fund, we have in principle approved the recapitalization of the Jobs Fund. This will now need to be operationalized, and in particular, a decision will need to be made to the extent to which the Jobs Fund will be recapitalized. The location of the Jobs Fund, because this is an opportune time to do such evaluations, and the Jobs Fund is undertaking its own evaluation, but as in terms of Treasury, will be evaluating its location, as well as, given that the Jobs Fund has now completed its original scope, it will be looked at in terms of what would be the nature and types of support the Jobs Fund will be providing. I'll also address the issue of the Jobs Fund in terms of its contribution. And certainly we can offer to the committee that now that we've finished, the Jobs Fund has finished this part of its lifespan, and given its significant contribution, that we can do a presentation specifically on the Jobs Fund and the innovations and learnings and knowledge that we have gained out of implementing the Jobs Fund. In terms of the impact specifically, we can provide that to you both in writing and in that presentation, but it's important for the committee to note that not only is this a contribution, only one contribution to our enormous challenges of addressing unemployment, but the manner in which the Jobs Fund is established, and particularly the matched funding, has made a significant contribution to our understanding of these kind of grants. In terms of the IFMS roadmap, Treasury remains committed to the implementation of IFMS as per our plan, as articulated in the targets of the MTSF, which is full rollout by 23-24. And it's for this reason that National Treasury is spending significant time, energy, effort, and resources to unlock the challenges of implementation that we've been experiencing, including engaging with CETA, and in the event that procurement cannot be conducted, we will do it ourselves. The Zondo Commission found there were no findings on IFMS in the Zondo out of the investigation of the Zondo Commission, and in fact, whilst we await the SIU, the Public Protector, the Hawks, our own forensic investigation equally, those are the only standing findings that we had that referred in the main to weaknesses that Treasury has since addressed and continues to address in our administrative processes of contract management, administration, supply chain administration. These matters are being addressed. In terms of the status of IFMS around the audit, one of the reasons why National Treasury took the extreme decision of not declaring IFMS, the payment, as fruitless and wasteful, was because this matter must be resolved. It has long been a dispute, and we need to apply all mechanisms available to us in order to assist both the AGSA as well as ourselves and other government departments that run such large, complex projects on resolving these kinds of challenges with these projects. So it is in the interest of ensuring that we don't continue this dispute, but actually come to a resolution. National Treasury would not have received a qualified audit but for IFMS. The AG was very clear and indicated such to us. If we had, as we have previously, accepted the fruitless and wasteful expenditure finding, and we have done that previously,